Good Monday. It's August 15th. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Briefing. Lot to get to, lots of big political issues, but also a big worldly issue. Today, Monday, August 15th, is the one-year anniversary of that horrible pullout in Afghanistan. And I think, frankly, we're still reeling from it. 13 service members were killed. And it's interesting. I remember last Memorial Day thinking how different that Memorial Day felt. I don't know, maybe it's the proximity and the attention and the number of people that died at once. And, obviously throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, lots of men and women have been killed, but there was something very, poignant and impactful about the manner in which those individuals were killed. It's interesting. We're going to have on Spicer and Company tonight, James Comer. He's the top Republican on the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee. And they're actually releasing a report from the House Foreign Affairs that talks about this withdrawal. It's interesting. It cites that 800 Americans were actually helped out of Afghanistan, which really contradicts the number that the Biden administration had said were remaining and wanted to get out. And that's how many kind of got out after the fact. And there may be actually folks in there still. Anyway, it'll be really interesting. But this report is 118 pages that examines not just the Biden administration. That was really interesting. It goes back and it looks at Trump and it talks about how both parties, different administrations of different parties, dealt with Afghanistan, the failures and issues that occurred over a lot of time, and frankly, the failure to plan adequately. And if you think about it's how many lives have lost going out of there, how much equipment we left, then the damage done to our allies. Like how many of our allies sort of looked at us after we exited and how we did it and thought, are you kidding? You did that? I think then there's also the sort of the long-term damage that we did when it comes to our adversaries. They look at this and say, really, this is how you guys exit. This is how you treat coalition partners. These are the kind of deals you make. Think about this. We made a deal with the Taliban. They said that they would treat women well. Clearly, that's not the case. It is unbelievable, the restrictions that have been put back in place in the way they're treating women, which is ironic considering how this administration talks about their concern for women and women's rights, whatever. You've got the idea that they're harboring terrorists in plain sight, something that they had explicitly said they wouldn't do. There's so much wrong with this. And if you're think about this, like if you're Iran and they're trying to negotiate getting back in that horrible deal, you look and go, yeah, this is how these guys negotiate and how they enforce deals. So I think from so many different perspectives, reflecting on the damage that was done and the way that we got out of Afghanistan a year later is something that I think, frankly, is going to haunt us forever. And I would say the one last thing is by giving up that foothold we had in that area of the world, we basically gave China a huge gift. And it is something that there's a reason we have bases around the world. There's a reason we have a base in Guam. There's a reason we keep a huge naval presence in Japan. It is forward deployed strength. It's a deterrent. It is so important, not just for everyone talks about the world's police, and this is our defense. Anyway, I just, on this day, I hope we can reflect on what a disaster it was, especially as we're now at the, inside the 90-day mark. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's top of mind for voters. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, two big states, I think a couple states, few states, but two states that we're going to keep an eye on for primaries. The first one is Wyoming. This one, I just am so fascinated with. This is obviously the race there to watch is this Liz Cheney reelection. If you're watching or listening to this on Monday, today, August 15th, tonight on Spicer and Company on Newsmax, we have Harriet Hagedorn, who is the woman challenging Liz Cheney. They actually had known each other for quite some time. I think Harriet actually supported Liz in the past, helped raise money, and now she's by some accounts up by about 30 points. The thing that I find fascinating about the Cheney race is like what Liz Cheney's strategy is. And by that, I mean this. She is basically running ads against the most popular guy in Wyoming. Trump got just shy of 70% in this. And so she's going after saying, this is why you need to reelect me. And I'm like, no one elects a congressman or a congresswoman because of who they go after. It's like they get stuff done. That's your representative in Washington. And that's what she's running her closing ads on. And I'm like, there's nobody on earth that's their thing. I'm going to get so-and-so or keep so-and-so. Like, I'm fascinated by the strategy, pumping millions of dollars in, having a bunch of left-wing Hollywood celebrities endorse her. Al Franken, the disgraced former senator from Minnesota that was caught on camera, me tooing somebody on a USO tour, came out and endorsed her. I'm like, what sort of moron thinks that in Wyoming that's going to go over well? I mean, I would probably say it probably wouldn't go over well in a Democratic primary these days. But anyway, it's so weird, the strategy that is getting run. She's got her father out there who's doing this whole thing about her getting taken down. And it's like, the reason I say this is she's raised a bunch of money, a lot of it from liberal activists. She's apparently trying to get people in Wyoming. You can actually go to the polls if you're an independent Democrat, register the day of the primary for another party and vote in it. So in theory, you can get a bunch of Democrats, independents to vote for you and try to, make up the delta on that. It just doesn't work that way. People aren't going to do it. And if they did, there aren't enough in Wyoming to overcome how much she's down. Okay. So it'll be an interesting night. My guess is this thing gets called early. Like I said, the polls show Hagedorn up anywhere from the low 20s to 30 points. This is going to be an early night. But the funny thing about this is you've seen story after, there's one in the Washington Post today, there's one in the New York Times the other day about how this is just the beginning of her fight. And I'm like, where is she going? I don't get that. It's like they keep talking about her running for president, and I don't get of what. Because if she really thinks she's running for president, it's like someone's got to fund you. And there's these outside groups that say that they'll help fund her. Okay, well, they can only give a maximum of whatever it is, $5,400 now. Maybe it gets indexed, so it's gone up, I'm sure, a little from the last thing, but roughly that. So at some point, you have to run a campaign, run ads, do all that kind of stuff. I just don't see any scenario where, she cannot run an effective campaign that gets anything significant. And the other thing is, and we'll get into these in some later podcasts, we talk about the process because way too early to talk presidential. In most states in the Republican side, you have to hit a threshold. So like, let's say in a primary state, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. You have to get like 15% of the vote before you even qualify to start getting delegates. So if you get less than 15, some states it's 20, some it's 10, whatever, you get nothing, zero. So even if there's 10 candidates, if one candidate got like 12% and the rest of them got 8, and if a state had a 10% threshold, that candidate that got 12 would get all the delegates and no one else would get any. So my point is that like Cheney would have to run a race where she could be getting 10, 15% in a bunch of these states, or it would get nothing, zero, nada. You don't get a single delegate. You don't get to go to the convention. You get nada. And I don't know why anyone hasn't taken the time to understand the process well enough to realize this. You can be a nuance and a gnat and fly around and do stuff. But again, all that takes money. And I just don't see how this happens. So anyway, keep an eye on the Wyoming primary tomorrow, but watch a bunch of fawning press on Wednesday morning talking about how she's a champion of this. I will say this, one other small note. I love the fact that all these liberals who hated the Cheney family forever and talked about how they were neocons and warmongers and they lied and whatever, are now like, the Cheneys are so honest. And I mean, there was literally Eugene Robinson, one of the leftists from the Washington Post, was on the show talking about how this is who the Cheneys have always been. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You've always talked crap about the Cheneys. And all of this stuff about Iraq and warmongering and taxes and waterboarding. And suddenly now, because she's so high profile going against Donald Trump and her dad didn't add for her, they're amazing people. The left is literally lost their mind. And one last point, then I'll move on. As soon as the left has someone else to focus on, meaning it's a head-to-head race, Trump versus whatever, they're going to go with their people. The left, these Kevin Costner types that are wearing t-shirts saying I'm with Liz, as soon as there's a general election where they can actually pick a Democrat, they're going with that person. They're not going to go hang out with Liz Cheney. So this is easy right now. It's Wyoming. It's whoever wins the Republican primary wins. It's not a tough choice. As soon as it's a tough choice, they're not going to be with her. Trust me on this one. All right, moving. I guess it's northwest. Yeah, my geography is not the strongest. Let's go up to Alaska. Two interesting races there. Senate race. Lisa Murkowski is running. And Alaska does these jungle primaries with ranked choice. It's fascinating. What that means is, and Maine went this way too, and there's a whole theory here that Alaska redid its primaries to basically help Lisa Murkowski. So that, because how this works is when you vote, you're just not voting for one person. You rank your vote. So you go, I'm voting for person A, number one, B, number two, C, number three. And as those persons, if someone doesn't get 50%, then they drop the bottom person off. And then they recalculate everybody's second choice. And then it keeps going until somebody gets over 50%. This would seemingly help somebody like Lisa Murkowski, because if some of the smaller folks drop off, she has been in the Senate a long time. Her father was the senator before her, governor before that. They have a huge name, and she's the most well-funded and well-known of all the candidates. So she just needs to keep rolling along to get to 50%. And I truly believe that this will benefit her. Remember, the funny thing is she actually lost her primary going back a couple cycles and ran a write-in campaign. Think about this. You have to spell Murkowski. I mean, it's just not easy. It's not like spelling Jones. And so she won. She literally won a general election where the entire strategy was to get people to write her name in. Now, again, she's got a very, very well-known, popular family name, especially back then. So I get it. But this is going to be really interesting to see if she pulls this off. Kelly Chewbacca is the Trump-endorsed candidate that's running against her. I think, all things being equal, Kelly Chewbacca probably wins on the first round with a plurality. That won't count, though. Again, you have to get over 50%. Murkowski's counting on that. So what she wants to do is make the case to the independents and Democrats. Okay, vote for your person first. I get it. But then, as she just wants to keep saying to them, but then remember, make me your second choice, make me your third choice. And I think that's where she, because of her long-standing position in the state, the family name, et cetera, I think this will be interesting to see how many rounds it takes and if she comes out. I think it'll be interesting, but I don't even want to guess, because you've got Mark Bisich in there, who's, again, his dad had been prior elected, well-known, another family name. So, between those three, the dynamic is just interesting, because you never know if someone picks second and third and fourth, I guess. So it could just keep going, and you don't necessarily know where somebody sort of gets tired of making either their second or third or fourth choice. Anyway, the other race there, they've got this special election. This House, former Congressman Don Young died not too long ago. And a huge amount of people jumped in the race, and they go to this thing where they pick the top four, and then they go into this jungle primary, right? Sarah Palin jumped in the race. She got 27% in the first round, and the next closest candidate got 19. Then the candidate after that, Al Gross, was 13, and Mary Pelota was last at 10. Okay, that's good, right? And again, if this was any other normal circumstance, she would have won. Palin's 27, though. The question is, she needs to figure out how that's going to get to 50. Same issue, this ranked choice voting now. So you've got to take the candidates that dropped off and go after their voters. Number one. Number two, keep people motivated, because they've already voted once. Now they got to come back and do it again. That's tough. And then three is, you're going to, you look at the people who didn't do as well, maybe Al Gross and Mary Pelota, and try to target their folks and say, okay, guys, your candidate's not going to win. When after the second round, will you vote for me? This will be a really interesting thing to see if Palin can get to the 50%. Obviously, again, very well known, but people I know in and out of Alaska have different opinions on where she stands with the party. Obviously, this is a general, like they're not, whoever wins this gets the seat, right? So it's you got everybody. This isn't just a Republican primary anymore. So fascinating there. The big story of the week, though, politically, continues to be this raid at Mar-a-Lago. And this has just been, I think, so fascinating on so many levels, especially as a non-lawyer. I have had people on Spicer and Company almost every night talking about the new and nuances, the new information, the nuances of this, because I'm fascinated by it on so many levels. And I think, so here's a couple things that are just important, I think, for context. And again, we've got Rudy Giuliani on tonight, former acting attorney general Matt Whitaker on the show. So if you're listening tonight, hopefully you can tune in, because I want to suss out some of this, because I don't completely understand some of the law here. But the number one thing that you got to remember is that two things, in my opinion. One, it's not like Trump personally was filling boxes with stuff and taking it with him. That's just, no one possibly thinks that's the case. I mean, this was aides putting things in boxes and bringing them to Mar-a-Lago. Two is Mar-a-Lago was the winter White House, and he'd been going down there, probably since October, I don't know, maybe November, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is prior all the way till January 20th. So there's probably a bunch of stuff there that he'd worked on or brought with him at some point or other, or an aide had brought and put in a box or whatever. That's, to me, just, and I say that for context, because it's not like they just took a bunch of boxes out of the White House in the last day and brought them to Mar-a-Lago. My guess is these things had kind of accumulated over time. The second thing is, I'm fascinated by the process here. So the government contacts Trump, says, hey, we think you have some documents. They meet with him. Okay, there you go. They say, great. And the FBI comes in with all these agents, a counterintelligence officer. They look around, they leave. Apparently, according to some of these reports, Trump's lawyers tell him, hey, we think you got everything. They call him back and say, no, we didn't. We think you have some stuff. Can you put a lock on that door downstairs, or wherever the heck this thing is, where these boxes are? The Trump folks say, sure, we'll put a lock on it. Well, just stop, full stop right there. Number one, if you really think that this is important stuff, classified, TSSCI, high level, wouldn't you go get it right then? Wouldn't you call them and say, we're going to come tomorrow? But if you really thought it was that important, or that there was even the idea that it could be, you'd say, hey, we need to come back tomorrow and look at it. Are you good with it? So you just really think that you go, hey, can you guys go down to the store and get a lock? That's not, I'm sorry. Like, if it's that big of a deal, that's how the government handled it. And then, okay, then here's the kicker. Then they wait a while. So here's the thing. Why, one, did they wait? Two, why didn't they just keep the process going and say, okay, you've been giving us stuff, can we have the rest of it? Or we're going to subpoena the rest of it, or whatever. But the next thing you know, there's 30 FBI agents there going into the home and cracking safe. Like, there was no sign, and there's been nothing that I'm aware of where either anybody's saying that that Trump objected to this, or that they were blocking them or whatever. Yes, they're saying he might not have agreed that some of this stuff was theirs and whatever, but those are logistical differences. The Trump folks were giving them access and allowing them in, and so if you were really worried about this, then go in and get the rest. But no one's making that case that anybody stopped them. And again, if it's that big of a deal, if you're worried about this information, why didn't you get it sooner? I don't, maybe I'm missing something here, but I don't get that. Why not just go that day, go the next day, go anytime in the following week? To me, that's the sort of thing that I don't get. Why did it escalate so quick? And so far, you would think something of this level, they would leak out, because everything leaks out. Hey, we recovered this, this, and this. I mean, pictures of the president of France or whatever the heck. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, but I mean, I don't know that rises to the level. I mean, it's not like, I mean, the stuff that Trump knows in his head that he got briefed on every day in those intelligence, that's what you got to worry about. I'm not dismissing the magnitude of this, but I mean, in terms of classified information, the stuff that's on a bunch of these sheets, again, if it was that big of a deal, go get it. Fascinating to me. how this process works. And the thing I said is keep having folks on the show. The goal every night, that they keep going, is to, I think, ask the questions that hopefully you are interested in. You're always free, as you know, to either go to my website, seanspicer.com, or DM me on Instagram, especially if you're one of those people who've subscribed and reviewed Bread and Butter Issues. But I'm sort of fascinated by how this went down in terms of the process. And then obviously there's the double standard. And I'm going to ask that tonight. How does Hillary Clinton not rise to this? It was on a server. So what's the difference, Sean? Well, the difference is that could have been hacked. Somebody could have gone in. I mean, in order for you to get this stuff from Mar-a-Lago, whatever it is, you had to break in, steal it, whatever. And there's no, I mean, so far, clearly they didn't think it was that big of a deal. They just told them to put a lock on it or whatever. She could have gotten into her secret server. She was doing that intentionally to hide stuff. There's no evidence that Trump was trying to evade anything or hide stuff. He probably wanted to brag about half of the stuff in there. Hey, look at this letter that I have, or I don't know what it is. It's also not like he did it. I mean, I guarantee you there's a bunch of stuff lying around the White House as they were jamming to get out the door, and some aide was like, okay, we'll bring this, this, and this, because technically you're still president when he left even. Anyway, I will be very interested to see where this thing goes, because I truly think the Democrats overreached on this and don't get it. And it looks political. And that's the thing that people have to remember. I say this all the time in politics, like perception is all that matters, right? If you can tell me like, oh, well, they went through this process, I get it. But at the end of the day, politics is about perception. It's about feeling your pain, making sure that people think that you care, demonstrating a willingness to try to fix something. There's a reason that, like, after a huge storm, congressmen send a letter to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, not because they don't think FEMA knows that there's a storm. It's because they want to be able to show the American, their constituents, hey, I fought for you. See, here's this letter that I sent, as if FEMA doesn't have, the internet. So that's what this is all about. And if people believe that the Justice Department was weaponized or used, that's going to be a problem politically. So, this is going to be interesting how this plays out, because I think it looks bad. And you saw Corinne Jean-Pierre, maybe on this week, she was like, the president didn't have a clue this, because I get it that they wanted to look like but he also sitting on a beach in South Carolina. Like, he doesn't look like he's engaged right now. And all this is happening. It's not a good look. Last thing is the media, and I'll tee off on that for a second. This idea over and over again that the media keeps saying that Biden had a good week. He did a great job. It's like, I don't know, is 87,000 new IRS employees a great week? Is raising taxes a great week? None of the things that they're talking about was like Biden's thing. The burn pits thing, that wasn't his. Chips, not his. This reconciliation bill, that was Manchin meeting with Schumer, cutting a deal, and then sending it to the House. That wasn't Biden. There literally was an AP story last week that said, despite being in the arena for 40 years, Biden's first 2 years have come at the greatest success when he's not in the room. He's not, so he's not engaged. He just spent 16 days hanging out upstairs because he had COVID. And then he went off to the beach in South Carolina. So I don't know how they're calling all this a big win. If I'm a Republican, I'm talking about massive tax increases, more government spending, and tons more IRS agents. I'm not really sure that that's a winning message that Democrats coming in cycle this for these midterms want to defend. There's a story in Politico this morning that, like, as of now, Biden's been in office, 18 months? They spent $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. Where did that money come from? From you. Well, via China. So I don't know where this is coming from, but it's literally amazing the stuff the press does. On this week, as I was just saying, Jonathan Karl was the guest host. And ironically, he had White House Press Secretary Corinne Jean-Pierre on for her first Sunday show interview. And I thought, okay, this will be interesting to see how she defends the Biden administration. And throughout the whole show, I think Jonathan Karl did a better job of acting as White House spokesman than Corinne Jean-Pierre. He was literally stopping people talking about how great Biden was doing and the hurdles that he'd overcome. He stopped Governor Larry Hogan, no friend of Trump's, midway through one of his sentences. Hogan had said that Biden was a failed president. And Jonathan Karl stops him and says, no, You can't call him a failed president after this week. And I'm thinking, first of all, he can call him whatever the heck he wants. Second of all, I still think he's like, look at his approval rating. Look at what else he's done. It's the 1-year anniversary of Afghanistan, as we talked about at the beginning. That's a huge failure. The economy, inflation's at a 40-year high. Gas prices are still high. What is going well? And somehow we can't call him a failed president because Jonathan Karl said so. Give me a break. Then you had Andrea Mitchell. She was guest hosting. Must have been like Sunday show day off. I don't know. I didn't check out a couple of the other ones, but Andrea Mitchell's guest hosting on Meet the Press. She had Senator Mike Grounds on the program, and he's talking about the economy and that we're in a recession. And she stops him and she says, "You're using an outdated definition." An outdated definition? No, that's the definition that everybody's always agreed to. It's just that, and by the way, when I say everyone, I mean several people on her network have said it. We played the clips on Spicer and Company of these folks in the media saying the thing. It's just that because it's Biden now, it's like, well, that doesn't count. The double standard is so unbelievable over and over again that now that Biden's in, so much of what was wrong when Trump was in office is now okay. Definitions, political attacks, it's all okay now. Suddenly everyone cares about law enforcement because a bunch of kooks said stuff about the FBI, which, by the way, I totally think is wrong. Like, it's not the agent's fault that they were following. It's, if you have a problem with the FBI, in my opinion, it's with the leadership. The FBI agents are doing their job. That's how they work. Okay. But the idea that somehow all these folks in the media suddenly care about attacks on law enforcement, where they sat idly by when Democrats and folks on the left attacked the police, who every day are on that street corner in those car stops, and they said nothing and frankly justified it. Suddenly now it's a major issue. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's fascinating that the lengths that these guys go to cover for the left. Anyway, that was a lot to get to on a Monday. Excited for another great conversation this Thursday. We've got a lot of great guests lined up over the next month. I will say it definitely spans the range in terms of some people in politics, some people out of politics, but all great people, all great conversations. And again, I do appreciate everybody who subscribed and shared this thing. The reviews are super helpful. So if you can hit that 5-star button, if you can write, love to listen to the podcast, Sean's the greatest person in the world. Whatever it is always appreciated. It helps us move up the charts. Really appreciate that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as well. You feel caught up, you feel engaged, either virtually or in person. Go to your water cooler and try to act like the smartest person now. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday for another great conversation. That's it for this edition of Beyond the Briefing.